Had just started my first job out of college, and I was so excited to be working in New York City. I'd been working in the city for a few months at that point, and I remember it was a Tuesday, an extremely busy day in our office, and it was my turn to go and get everybody their morning coffee. It was something that our team had done for each other. I commuted in to the city, got to the Long Island Railroad station, walked to work, and at that point, the first plane had hit the towers, and I was not aware of it. I had no knowledge of it. I was in Midtown by Grand Central Station, so I had no idea that anything was going on until I went to the coffee bar downstairs to get coffee, and the two gentlemen that were behind the counter had a radio on and were talking about a fire. Nothing about a plane, just that there was an announcement that there was a fire at the Trade Center. And then the announcement came that a plane had hit the Trade Center. And by the time I'd finished paying for my coffee, the second plane had hit the Trade Center. And I remember I was so naive, I turned to the man behind the counter and I said, "Is there something wrong with the air traffic patterns? What's going on?" And they told me no, they think it's terrorists. And that was a real shock for me, because we're talking about a New York where you didn't see National Guard walking around with guns. If you went into a major station, you would maybe see a police officer by the door. So to think that somebody had intentionally done this was the first thing I remember, and just the sheer horror of what was going on. The next part of my day was when I went back upstairs, and everybody was just absolutely panicked. Nobody knew what to do. Our cell phones weren't working. The landlines had intermittent access. They would work 1 minute, the next minute they would be dead. Nobody really could understand what was going on or why this had happened. And then when the news that the Pentagon was hit, that's when you saw people who I looked up to, people who I admired, and the leaders in our office. They didn't know what to do. Nobody had any answers, and you didn't see anybody really leading the charge as to giving direction as to what we were supposed to do. And I think when you're young, that's probably the scariest part, was realizing that adults sometimes have a hard time comprehending the really tough things about life. And this was one of these situations where everywhere I turned, nobody had an answer. Nobody knew what we were supposed to do. When my mother called, one of the assistants grabbed me and put me on the phone with her, and I maybe had 30 to 45 seconds to talk to her. And I said to her, I probably won't be coming home tonight. I don't think I'm going to be able to get out of here. So I just, don't worry about me. I'm going to go to the hospital to try to donate blood, and I'll come home as soon as I can. And I remember thinking, because we didn't really know what was going on, would that be like the last time that I spoke with my mother? So basically, I'm looking outside at Grand Central, and there are crowds and crowds of people. We're talking about thousands of people standing outside of Grand Central like sheep, just not knowing what to do. They just wanted to get out, and I knew at that point I was not going to be able to leave. Other things that happened during that day were very strange, and I don't think the media talked about them. Things like people ignoring traffic lights, people rushing through traffic lights, ignoring red light, green light, a fire truck literally smashing into a car and spinning it around on Park Avenue, cars flying by covered with dust. And at the time, now having seen the footage, I understand what was happening downtown while I was in Midtown, but we didn't know what this dust was, and we didn't really understand what was going on. Things didn't make sense until after the day had ended. I ended up in the Village. Toward the end of the night, I stayed with a friend, and there were more National Guard on the street than civilians. Tons. It just seemed as though there were tons of National Guard in uniform, huge machine guns. And again, at the time, I had never seen machine guns. Now when you go to New York, it's commonplace. Helicopters, lots of them. And it was just very surreal to be walking around Greenwich Village and seeing just hordes of military personnel. And when I woke up in the morning, that's when the smoke started to drift upward. The fires had been put out, and we were able to leave. And I don't think I really talked to anybody for days after that. I really didn't have too much to say. I watched CNN a lot and just tried to process what had happened.